Hello, everybody, and welcome back. First things to, sorry about that. To lead off, I would like to apologize for not having put out a video last week. There were some things that I had to take care of, which made it impossible for me to put it out. I had some technical difficulties with putting out the video, and also I had to deal with the fact that I am now officially a quarter of a century old, having turned 25 on the 18th of November. And as with most things that I do, I did not age gracefully. So, as a further factor, I was still somewhat hungover from Tuesday's election results. So, with that behind us now, I think we can finally pick up where we left off last time, which was with the power to coin money. Now, at first, we would assume that this phrase's meaning in the Constitution is completely obvious and could not possibly be misconstrued. However, as will be demonstrated, this is most certainly not the case. The constitutional text concerning this phrase says that Congress shall have the power, quote, to coin money, regulate the value thereof, and a foreign coin, and fix the standard of weights and measures, end quote. Thankfully, the verb to regulate has more or less been defined already and will greatly reduce the workload necessary to define this phrase's many parts. However, as usual, some historical background as to why the power was granted to Congress in the first place would in fact be helpful. This, as with many of the phrases included in the Constitution, was a provision that grew out of a defect that the founders perceived in the Articles of Confederation, and Joseph Story commented on the detrimental effects of said defect, saying, quote, "Under the Confederation, the Continental Congress had delegated to them the sole and exclusive right and power of regulating the alloy and value of coins struck by their own authority, or that of the states, and fixing the standard of weights and measures throughout the United States. It is observable that, under the Confederation, there was no power given to regulate the value of foreign coin, an omission which, in great measure, would destroy any uniformity in the value of the current coin, since the respective states might, by different regulations, create a different value in each. The Constitution has, with great propriety, cured this defect, and indeed, the whole clause, as it now stands, does not seem to have attracted any discussion in the Convention." End quote. That was from Joseph Story's Commentaries on the United States Constitution, Volume 3, Section 1112. Now, when the individual states were permitted to coin and regulate money, foreign currency and the respective states' money often were regulated so as to have different values, because the states often had different means of calculating this value, and that made trade far more difficult. Now, this power also seems to have been granted in much the same spirit as the Commerce Clause, for both were intended to simplify trade and promote unity. Now, clearly, this power is meant solely to ensure a uniform value of United States currency throughout the whole of the Union. And the corresponding power to fix the standard of weights and measures was also granted with much the same reasoning. Now, thus, the intent of the clause in question is now known, but what do its various components mean? The power to regulate the value of money coined by Congress and a foreign coin should be less befuddling, given that one now understands the verb to regulate as meaning to adjust by rule or method. This is something that it seems rather simple to understand, that it would seem that this power means that Congress may create the rules by which the value of money, whether coined by Congress's own authority or a foreign coin, or that of foreign nations, is ascertained when used in the United States. The most appropriate understanding of this clause is that Congress may specify the weight of coins that it mints. However, the clause as a whole is still far from being entirely defined. The first part of the clause, to coin money, is the most crucial and critical if one intends to understand the rest of it. Now, luckily, Blexton reemerges as a useful source on this topic, writing that money is, quote, "the medium of commerce and an universal medium, or common standard, by comparison with which the value of all merchandise may be ascertained, or it is a sign which represents the respective values of all commodities," end quote. Now, he then would further elaborate, saying that, quote, "The coining of money is, in all states, the act of the sovereign power, and its value may be known on inspection. And, with respect to coinage in general, there are three things to be considered therein: the materials, the impression, and the denomination. With regards to the materials, the money of England must be either gold or silver," end quote. The thing that should jump out immediately from this excerpt is that when one is granted the power to coin money, it is understood that the money coined can only be of the two principal precious metals, namely gold or silver. All other materials are, in fact, illegitimate coinage and ineligible for coinage at all. This provision's relation to paper money will be explained in a moment. Now, also, as Richard H. Timberlake stated in his book, Gold, Greenbacks on the Constitution, the phrase to coin money taken as a whole means nothing more than the authority to provide the technical facilities for minting coins. And finally, one must know what it means to fix the standards of weights and measures. We should note that this phrase modifies Congress's power to regulate money and is not a separate power in and of itself. This power, like so many others, has its roots in English common law, although in England it was vested in the Crown and not in Parliament, properly speaking. Again, Blexton wrote on the matter extensively, saying that, quote, "With us in England, the King's prerogative, so far as it relates to mere domestic commerce, will fall principally under several articles. The second of which is the regulation of weights and measures. These, for the advantage of the public, ought to be universally the same throughout the kingdom, being the general criterions which reduce all things to the same or an equivalent value. But, as weight and measure are things in their nature arbitrary and uncertain, it is therefore expedient that they be reduced to some fixed rule or standard, which standard it is impossible to fix by any written or oral proclamation, for no man can, by words only, give another an adequate idea of a foot rule or a pound weight. It is therefore necessary to have recourse to some visible, palpable, and material standard, by forming a comparison with which all weights and measures may be reduced to one uniform size." End quote. Now, one must note that Blexton uses the phrase regulation of weights and measures directly. Now, also, given that the United States Constitution is written in Blextonian terms, one can easily infer that, for all intents and purposes, to regulate weights and measures is synonymous with what it means to fix them. Blexton also wrote shortly after the above-cited excerpt that the weight and standard of a coin is, quote, "wherein consists the intrinsic value," end quote. Now, as used in the Constitution, the corresponding provision seems merely to reinforce the preceding power to regulate the value of money coined by Congress. That is, Congress's power to specify a weight of fine gold or silver as equal to a number of the units of account, which are dollars. Now, that excerpt was taken from Timberlake's book, once again. Now, also, Congress more than likely did not, and does not, have to specify a physical object whose weight equaled a particular unit of measurement, since those weights, such as pounds, ounces, and so on, they've already been long established and incorporated into the English common law. Now, therefore, Congress's ability to fix the standard of weights and measures seems to be one of those pleonasms and repetitions in the Constitution to which Justice Story referred. Now, an accurate summary of what this means to the general populace comes from Timberlake, once again, who said that this power of government is more of a housekeeping measure, for it, quote, "was in fact nothing more than a license to make minor adjustments in the mint values of coin and silver that would keep both metals active in the currency system," end quote. Now, that indirectly ties into something known as Gresham's Law, which really states more that bad money drives out good money, or that money overvalued by the state will drive out money that is undervalued by the state. For instance, if the state were to declare tomorrow that 3/4 would equal the value of $1, people would flock to using quarters for the exchange of currency for goods, because there is essentially more value in it, quote unquote, and the dollar would essentially fall out of circulation. I'm not going to go into a lot of the details of it, but that's more or less a brief summary of what that means. Now, as a parting clarification, one might wonder what this clause means in relation to the paper money, which we nowadays have become so accustomed to. Now, to be sure, the understanding of paper money is different from what it meant to be properly understood as. Properly speaking, paper money is representative of a specific quantity of gold or silver held in a bank. It is what paper money represents, not the paper money itself, that serves as legal tender, i.e., that which by law must be accepted as payment in satisfaction of a debt if rendered by the debtor. That is the definition of legal tender. Now, thus, by transferring this kind of paper money, also known as a certificate, to another, one is in fact transferring ownership of specific quantities of precious metals as compensation for a debt, for the person receiving the certificates may then redeem them at a bank for the appropriate amount of gold or silver. This facilitates trade because paper is far easier to do business with than coins, and yet precious metals remain the true currency of the realm. Now, nowadays, the paper money of the United States is no longer backed by a precious metal. I believe, officially went off the gold standard in its entirety under Nixon in 1971. Now, rather, it has been entirely divorced from the gold standard, and the paper itself is supposed to serve as legal tender. This is known as fiat money because it is brought into existence merely by government decree. Notice why that's also how you can have things like QE1, QE2, QE3, etc., which stands for quantitative easing, which is really just fancy terminology for inflation. The government just says, hey, we need more money, we're just going to print it. Because, before that time lag happens where it loses value and gets down to the poor people who will be essentially screwed over most by this, we'll be able to spend it at its current value. So, yay us. This is a blatant violation of the Constitution because, as previously mentioned, the money of the United States must be made of gold or silver, or at least, the certificates that we trade must represent those things. Now, Joseph Story touched on the topic, saying, quote, "It will be hereafter seen that this is an exclusive power of Congress, the states being expressly prohibited from coining money. It is difficult to maintain on the face of the Constitution itself and independent of long-continued practice the doctrine that the states, not being at liberty to coin money, can authorize the circulation of bank paper as currency at all. The states cannot coin money. Can they then coin that which becomes the actual and almost universal substitute for money? Is not the right of issuing paper intended for circulation in the place, and as the representative of metallic currency derived merely from the power of coining and regulating the metallic currency? Could Congress, if it did not possess the power of coining money and regulating the value of foreign coins, create a bank with the power to circulate bills? It would be difficult to make this out." End quote. Now, in this context, bills refers to bills of credit, which is synonymous with paper money. Now, given the nature of the Constitution, Story's argument cannot be rebuffed, really. This divorce of the national currency from precious metals is one of the main things that the founders sought to avoid when they crafted the Constitution. And Madison affirmed this and much of what has been established here in Federalist Number 44. Please, by all means, look at it. They discussed the issue thoroughly during the convention on August 16th of 1787. While some were wary to remove the power of Congress to issue paper money, Mr. Mason being one of the most prominent examples, the general sentiment of the convention was decidedly in favor of removing it. Several excerpts from Madison's notes show this. And these are taken from Madison's notes on the Constitutional Convention, and I'm retaining a lot of the style and grammatical errors so as to sort of keep it in form. He said he made many notes which said the following, quote, "Mr. Governor Morris moved to strike out and emit bills on the credit of the United States," end quote, "if the United States had credit, such bills would be unnecessary. If they had not, unjust and useless." Mr. Butler seconds the motion. Mr. Gorham was for striking out without inserting any prohibition. If the words stand, they may suggest and lead to the measure. Mr. Wilson, it will have a most salutary influence on the credit of the United States to remove the possibility of paper money. This expedient can never succeed whilst its mischiefs, referring to those under the Articles of Confederation, are remembered, and as long as it can be resorted to, it will be a bar to other resources. Mr. Reed thought the words, if not struck out, would be as alarming as the mark of the beast in Revelations. Mr. Langdon had rather reject the whole plan than retain the three words, and emit bills. On the motion for striking out, New Hampshire, aye. Massachusetts, aye. Connecticut, aye. New Jersey, no. Pennsylvania, aye. Delaware, I. Maryland, no. Virginia, I. North Carolina, I. South Carolina, I. Georgia, I. Now you'll notice right there, it's pretty evident the vote on the matter was not even close, with 9 voting for and only 2 opposed. And by this point, it is beyond doubt that paper money is unequivocally unconstitutional. So really, to sum up, this essentially was no more than a power given to Congress to allow them to mint money to coin money, properly speaking, in silver and gold exclusively. Nowadays, what we have is nothing more than worthless pieces of paper. Now, technically, it's made of a cotton fiber, because that's why you can send it through the wash and it'll still come out without being all crumpled and having fallen apart. But we call it paper money for simplicity's sake. Now, the reason why gold and silver were used as the major basis for the currency was because very, very rarely is there going to be a massive gold or silver strike which inflates the universe of gold or silver in existence and readily available. So that is, gold and silver, the value thereof, remains more or less constant with very little fluctuation. If your currency is based on gold or silver, the currency itself is also relatively stable. Notice nowadays, ever since we've gotten off the standard, things have just kind of ramped up and the dollar is just losing value out the wazoo. Because instead of being based on gold or silver's value itself, the paper money of today is based on what its value was yesterday, which was based on what it was the day before, which is based on what it was the day before that, which is based on what it was the day before that, etc., etc., etc. You've noticed that at that point, more or less, the value of the dollar becomes essentially baseless, and it can be regulated more or less by government at a moment's notice. Last I checked, the Constitution was supposed to be able to keep Congress and the government from being able to do that sort of thing, and yet more or less we've sort of let them get away with it. I would suggest that we fight that and get back to a gold standard, so that our money is once again one of our greatest prides and something that the world can look to as a mark of strength and stability. However, as it stands now, if we continue down this path, the government can inflate the currency because it's the bills that it would be printing out they don't actually represent anything other than the dollar, which is more or less some kind of nebulous idea instead of being something that is based solidly on the value of gold or silver. Now, that being said, I think we can officially wrap up for this time. And other than that, I would just have the one announcement, more or less, that given that I am now 25, and therefore officially, constitutionally old enough to, I would like, at some later date, to run for the 11th District of Virginia, hopefully to replace who we have right now, which is Jerry Connolly, in 2014. Now, obviously, that's going to require me getting some decent amount of support and help from people, such as yourselves, and or people in more of a political position that can assist me and are sympathetic with my cause. But obviously, if that were to take place, my number one concern would be the well-being and safety of the people entrusted to my care, mostly by upholding and fighting for the Constitution as it stands in Congress, and trying to uphold its principles in my every action and through my every vote that would be cast. Now, obviously, it's a long way off. Who knows? Maybe God has different plans. Knowing my luck, I'll get hit by a bus tomorrow. But assuming that doesn't happen, I would like to be able to make that run. In the meantime, however, I'm going to go take a nap, because I just got off work and I'm very, very tired. So with that, I can say farewell for now, and we'll pick up next time with defining the term militia. Oh, what fun we shall have. Okay, with that, I can say goodbye, God bless, and farewell. See you next time. Bye-bye.